Happy Sunday! Mike from Hound Dog Media here, and it's time for another episode of Con to Couch. With so many conventions delayed or canceled this year, we're bringing the best guests and coolest hangouts of that experience right to you in the comfort of your own home. In this episode of the Gamesmaster, Flint leads us through a look at the past, present, and future of Buck Rogers, one of the elder statesmen at the intersection of science fiction and pop culture. From comic strips and radio dramas in the early days, all the way to games and movies and TV later on, the still timeless Man Out of Time had a tremendous influence that spans so much of our culture today. We'll also be joined by special guests Lorraine Williams, Buzz Dixon, Don Murphy, and Kevin Altieri. Without further ado, here's Flint Dilley.
All right, yeah, without any further ado. So, yeah, this is a really great thing. We've been promising to talk about Buck Rogers. We haven't talked about Buck Rogers at all. And then I got really lucky, and like everybody said they'd come. So, I mean, these are very rare people to have on. Well, Buzz has been on a number of times before. He's kind of functioning as a co-host today. Lorraine Williams is, as most of you know, my sister. And so obviously she shares the heritage I have with Buck Rogers. She was pointing out today, the thing that's amazing is that we're on exactly the day when we got, SpaceX coming back. That's what it was, SpaceX, right?
Dragon,
yeah.
Dragon.
And then we got Don Murphy, a producer extraordinaire. Most of you know who Don Murphy is. This particular crowd knows Don Murphy from producing all the Transformer movies. What? Yeah, don't you think? I think that's what they know. I mean, they may or may not have seen, well, they probably seen Real Steel. They, what do you call it? Probably, what is it? Do you think they've seen your older stuff?
I think if they haven't seen Natural Born Killers, then they're very, very bad people.
Well, yeah, you know what they should see is they should see League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. I mean, you just sit there and watch it, and take the position you're going to have fun. You're not being critical, and it's actually quite a fun movie to watch if you're just saying, I'm going to watch a movie and have fun watching it. And then Kevin Altieri is up at least in the top of my screen. Kevin actually worked on Buck in the day on the Black Barney comic books. Did you ever do any of the actual Buck Rogers comic books in that period?
No, it was like,
Where did Barney go?
I mean, Buzz was such a good writer that Black Barney just took over. That's Buck Rogers comic,
That's right. This is a reunion of the Black Barney writing and comic team. All right, why don't you guys start out, since you guys both talk about that? Tell us what Black Barney. Do you guys? How much do you remember? But you even have some of the frames for Black Barney.
Yeah, I actually have comic pages. Go ahead, Buzz. Talk.
Well, Black Barney was originally a space pirate, as I recall, in the Buck Rogers comic strip, and he gradually, as many times these outlaw characters do, migrated from being a complete bad guy to being a good bad guy. I mean, he was always a little something illegal and scoundrelous about him, but he ended up being one of Buck's allies in the end. And when we were doing it for the comic book, we decided that he was some kind of cyborg advanced organism. He had been programmed and whatnot. And yeah, there we go. Beautiful. I love that stuff. I mean, Kevin captured the spirit of Buck Rogers so perfectly in that.
Well, it was unbelievably, the stuff was unbelievably fun looking.
Oh yeah.
Just looked at it and it just looked like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
It was not one of these, ponderous, tedious, comics that you did it. Yeah.
Big space battle.
You have machines that say beep 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 and like that.
I really enjoyed this. It's like the next job. Well, I guess it was this. I was going to say the next job I had was actually I stopped doing it because of Batman. Otherwise, I would have just kept working for TSR and just doing more Black Barneys.
Yeah, because you went on and produced the show with Paul and Bruce Timm, right?
Yeah.
Director.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's hard to believe that's that long ago.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So Don. Okay. So what was your first orientation of Buck Rogers? How did you hear about it? I mean, Lorraine and I were born genetically attached to us, but yeah.
I think probably my first connection to Buck Rogers was through the strip, which was something we got on the weekend sometimes in New York, and it was it was much more. Obviously, it was still science fantasy, but it was Flash Gordon was the "there's no way this shit's ever going to happen" comic strip.
Yeah.
Whereas Buck Rogers was like, well, maybe this could happen. Jetpacks, sure, why not? Buck Rogers ended up, becoming the TV show answer, trying to do, Star Wars. Just unfortunately, the TV show was goofier. But I watched that when it came out and saw the movie in the theaters, and it's just the thing about the character is. Obviously, it's based on Rip Van Winkle, but it gives a hope that the future, back when it first came out and your grandfather was doing it, it was kind of like a World's Fair 1960s version of the future. But it gives hope that there will be a future, and there will be a future worth fighting for, which I think is a good thing about the property.
Well, yeah, it is very hopeful, and you nailed it. And Lorraine will can talk all day about this, so I'll be quick about it. But the whole point of Buck Rogers when it came out was that it was that Buck Rogers was based on science or plausible science. Is that I'm trying to remember how our grandfather put it, but it was, in other words, it had to be based on scientific principles. You remember all that, the standard sheet stuff, Lori?
Well, and he had a tremendous connection to the University of Chicago, and worked with and talked about and talked to scientists there, so that there was a string that could be attached from what was currently known to what the future might look like.
I was going to say my introduction to Buck Rogers was when I was a kid, watching the serials, the Buster Crabbe serials. And that was like, and I remembered Flash Gordon because they used to play those too. But the thing about Buck Rogers was like, yeah, it was like, I mean, it was still like, the same kind of airships and the same kind of rockets, which were really fanciful. But it's like, he's always talking about the principles of it. He was always like throwing a bit of science into his speech,
Yeah.
And then a guy would throw a spear at him. It's like, he's using it's like, he's using a spear now.
Well, they remember
Buck
that
Rogers,
control helmets. Sorry, what?
Buck Rogers was a key influencer in my young life, because even before I could read, I was following the Buck Rogers comic strip, in the paper. And one of the most iconic moments in my young life was there was a weekend strip where Buck and his human friends were playing a game of water polo against these aquatic aliens. I mean, they basically look like skinny versions of the creature from the Black Lagoon. And so Buck and his friends have got scuba masks on, and they're playing against these creatures in the pool. And when the game's over, they get out of the pool, Buck takes his mask off. The creatures put on fishbowl helmets full of water, so they can breathe on land. And as a 5-year-old kid, I'm going, yeah, of course, that's exactly what they would do. And it stuck with me all my life. I couldn't have been more than 5 years old when I saw that, but I mean, it really resonated, and it just burned itself into my memory.
Are your strongest memories of Buck the stories or the art?
The stories. The art was very good at the period that I was reading it in the comic strips, and I'm trying to remember.
Is that Murphy Anderson?
That was the Murphy Anderson era. I mean, Murphy Anderson couldn't draw a bad comic if you put a gun to his head. But the art was very good. It certainly caught my eye, but it was the stuff like the science fictional aspects of it. It was playing against aquatic aliens and having them put on a fishbowl helmet so they could breathe on land. And that was what was attracting me to it. It was that, taking reality and turning it about 90 degrees so that you look at it a different way.
And your major exposure was the Sundays or the dailies or both?
I'm pretty sure it had to be the Sundays because I don't remember reading the dailies.
Neither do I. It
of
was always
anything.
the Sundays. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't remember reading
Who
the
was
dailies.
writing the
mini
Sundays
comics.
when you were reading them?
Yeah. Excuse me?
Who was writing them when you were reading them?
Wow, that's a great question. I might be able to answer that because
No, I'm wondering from memory if
Yeah. Oh, that Lorraine, does that book look familiar to you at all?
no, I've never seen it before in my life.
let me see if I can find something. I'll see if I can locate something from that era and see if I can find who might have written it.
I remember that later era was like Gray Morrow, I think. Gray Morrow and what's the name of that other guy?
That was the New York Times.
Yeah, it was New York
Bob, it
from-
was Bob Barton. Bob Barton
Okay.
was the writer.
Was
Yeah.
doing the Sundays. Yeah, Greg Morrow came when the New York Times brought it back in the 60s.
Well,
Well,
Yeah.
no, it's
70s,
like the 80s, around the time of Star Wars.
Lorraine or Flint, how many different artists did do Buck Rogers?
Wow.
Like, there was like a King's, was it King?
All right, there's Dick Calkins was the first one, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then we already mentioned Murphy Anderson.
Right?
Yeager, what's?
Sorry, what?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember Yeager's
Yeager
first
did
name.
it.
now.
Yeah.
Rick Yeager.
Murphy. We said Murphy Anderson. It
Rick
was-
Yeager.
oh,
Did like Bob Powell, didn't he? I mean, no, it's like there was just a period like where that just totally missed me because I was like in between age wise. I was too young and stuff.
There were a bunch of them in the 50s and 60s. I'd say there are probably as many as a dozen artists.
Wow. Yeah.
no, it's pretty incredible. All right, so
And
The
the
next-
Sundays were generally done by a different group than did the dailies.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Did they do the same storyline?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That
they-
was
they didn't
that was
have to
fairly
hold that.
common of the era to have two storylines
Yeah.
going, one for the Sundays and one for the dailies.
Yeah.
You know.
No, it's like, yeah, because whatever. It's like my dad always got the New York Daily News Sunday because it's like basically because the comics were just the whole page,
Mhm.
but they didn't have Buck Rogers.
Was that a tabloid?
Yeah, it was huge. It's like, yeah, they'd come the Sunday, yeah, but it was,
No,
yeah,
but I mean, the format of the comic, was that a tabloid, half tab?
whole page with like a strip on the bottom,
Okay.
which would have like I really like because I take Silly Putty and I'd like
yeah,
have
remember that?
yeah, and it's like, but it's like, yeah, the Hartford Courant, which my father rarely got, was it was full page for most of it, but then it would have the half page ones, and they always put Prince Valiant on a half page and Flash Gordon on a half page, and I'm like, why'd you pick those?
Mhm.
It's like as a kid, I was just pissed off. It's like, oh, you decided to truncate the really good one, and it's like, in the meantime, well, Peanuts gets a whole page. Nothing wrong with Peanuts. But I mean,
Most of the time, newspapers bought a package, so they would buy the King feature or the, one of the other syndicates package, and only rarely would an independent be able to break into that.
Chester Gould hated Peanuts. I'm going to get a little side thing here. He hated Peanuts because he considered what Schultz was doing to be a travesty of the medium. And he did these occasional strips about a gang of artists, like 6 or 8 artists, all sitting shoulder to shoulder, doing a comic strip called Sawdust. It was nothing but a pile of dots. And each one is contributing their own dot, and they're arguing about it. And he hated Schultz.
yeah,
Just a piece of family lore. Our uncle turned down Peanuts thinking it would never be successful for the syndicate.
dang.
Boom, $1 trillion.
And then he left the syndicate about a year and a half later.
God.
Had Peanuts proven to be successful at that point, or was that?
We're talking about when Jack went to Elkhart, so I was too young to really remember.
You know what I've been trying to find is, remember the guy who did Dennis the Menace? Yeah, he sent me that. Hank Ketchum. He sent me that Daily Dilly. He had recreated my bedroom, in the background of the thing. It's like, I was thinking, wait, you should have taken off and really actually done the Daily Dilly. It's the phone I can't control here.
Goes along with the clock I can't control.
All right, so the next thing is, how does this stuff come? All right, in 2022, and leave it, in mediums other than movies, just for the purpose of this thought experiment. How does this stuff come back? Because the basic thrill I'm hearing of it is pretty primal and pretty basic.
Yeah, but did it ever leave? I mean, are you familiar with this book?
Yeah.
No.
It's called "Where's My Jetpack?"
No.
Came out a few years ago, a guide to the amazing science fiction future that never arrived. And it's his great book by this guy who wrote Robo Apocalypse that Spielberg's doing. And
Right.
almost everything in the book is basically Buck Rogers or Star Trek cool shit that we thought was going to come. I mean, the most interesting thing about 2020 is the biggest revolution in our lifetime is this, right?
Yeah.
Where we are all connected to each other. And that's not in any science fiction anybody was ever coming up with.
Well, I am on a record saying nobody wants a video phone. I mean, who wants a video phone? And because numerous times people tried to launch them, and they'd wheeze, and I just thought that's a product that nobody wants. And sure enough, I'm proven extremely wrong on that. All right,
Well,
all right.
I was about to say there was a British single comic strip, not a series, but just a one-page comic that was done in 1924 that said, if phones ever get small enough that you can carry them with you, and every single annoying thing about the phone, talking in public, having it ring at the wrong time, all of that, this guy predicted them in a 6-panel comic strip.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no. I was gonna. Okay, hey Buzz. Actually, I got a question. Or Flint.
Yes.
If we were to do Black Barney now,
Right.
Because, or Buck Rogers, but Buck Rogers, of course, but that world, and this is the technology. How would you do it different? Because it's got to have rivets.
Yeah, that's true.
You got to have bulkheads like it's the fucking Nautilus. Sorry, I should watch my mouth, but it's the Nautilus. And so how would this change it? Would they look? I mean,
well, you'd have to get your cover for your phone that's got rivets in it, right? You got to have your Nautilus iPhone cover, and have it look really retro.
well,
There's actually a name for it, Kevin.
what?
The style is called diesel punk.
Yeah. Okay.
There's steampunk, there's diesel punk, and now there's solar punk. And solar punk is the bright, shiny future, Star Trek type future stuff. But diesel punk is the way to go.
Yeah, because
there's Atom Punk too.
Yeah, but
I only know that because I got an Atom Punk invite.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. Yeah.
Format. I mean, could you do it every day as like a phone-based strip? Well, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's the format for this stuff now.
the format.
Yeah, in other words, could it be an everyday strip on the phone?
Oh,
I'm just throwing out bad ideas, but I'm trying to figure out.
well, I mean, it's of course you could do it. It's but I don't know. It's kind of like seems important to me if you do it now. I think it would be more popular if it was a book. The fact that if you go back, it's like all of a sudden I think people are like kind of hungry for tactile things.
That's absolutely. Both my kids have just kind of decided they're back to paper.
Yeah.
And they never were on paper in the first place. I mean, the other lives, they're pretty much their whole lives been digital. I don't think they ever not had an iPad, but neither of them prefer digital books.
Yeah. Well, Flint, I would suggest if you're going to do it with this, it's Buck reporting in every day from the future.
Oh,
He's,
that'd be
he's
kind of
from
fun.
our time. He's been shot 500 years into the future. He can't get back himself, but he can send reports back on a daily basis.
So he gives you he gives you a daily update from the future.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, because that kind of continuity would be really fun, and it's just very doable.
Mhm.
We could almost do it with the old strips too.
Yeah.
Well, no, no, I can forget it. Stupid question.
What'd you
No.
say?
No, it's like, but if if Buck Rogers, well, I don't know. It's like, I mean, of course, I think about cartoons, and I was thinking that the last few cartoons I've been doing, it's all digital. The last few shows going back, even working for Hasbro, and the only thing that ever saved me was making a hard copy, because it's some step of the way, stuff just got lost in the computer system, and you can't help it. It's going to happen. It happens in every production. But
No,
if you
that's
make
true.
a hard copy, or if it's drawn on paper, then you have it endlessly, and you can always just keep rescanning it.
And nobody can turn it off. I mean, one thing that kind of bothers me about digital books is, like, you actually don't own them. You sort of rent them. And but theoretically, they just like turn you off and you lose your library. Whereas, I have paper books from college that are perfectly fine. They don't they don't have to be recharged. They don't anything. So okay, so you're saying paper. Then there's the idea of a report in from the future, which is like the continuity adventure, which is a really interesting idea. I'm trying to figure out. I mean, because the thing with Buck Rogers is that at the time, it was, we think of it now and you think of it in kind of retro nostalgia. But the truth is, at the time, it was really thought provoking and people had never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
These were outlandish ideas that they sort of thought that could be real.
But it also has a great wish fulfillment element, which is always in any literature.
Yeah.
Well, and the times were incredibly similar to now, in that people were, for totally different reasons, somewhat confined to home or to a relatively small world.
Mhm.
And it gave them a view, a world outside of that world, which may have been pretty dark, to feel good about it.
Yes. Yeah. It
One
was
of the-
escapism.
yeah.
I've never seen. That was the other thing about Buck Rogers that everybody forgets, is it was the first. Lorraine can correct me if I'm wrong about this, or Buzz, or somebody that actually knows. But it was the first continuity action comic. In other words, where the story advanced every day, and it wasn't just a one-shot funny. And I think the truth is, it came out the same day as Tarzan, which is kind of the same thing.
What about Moon Mullins? Was that earlier?
Was that continuity?
I think so.
There was continuity in it, but it never depended on continuity. They would do like 6-week stretches of a story, and then they'd go to, just gag-a-day stuff for a while too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't designed as a continuity strip. But then Mutt and Jeff would do continuities. They'd do a week or two of something.
And Gasoline Alley.
Yeah, yeah.
And it predates Flash Gordon too,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, by
Yeah.
5 or 10 years, yeah.
Yeah,
That's one of the
Lorraine
great-
can tell the
That
story.
is one of the great stories.
Yeah, you tell the story.
Well, the story was that William Randolph Hearst called my grandfather and said he wanted to buy Buck Rogers. And when it was not for sale, he said, well, then I'll knock it off, basically. And that was the origins of Flash Gordon.
Well, actually, what I like about the story was he didn't just call him up. He had him come stay at San Simeon
Oh, awesome!
for like a week.
That would have
And-
been a cool.
what?
There's a film
Yes.
movie right there.
And they stayed at San Simeon, and after about a week, it was like, well, I'd like to buy Buck Rogers, and I think my grandfather said, look, anything else, that's fine, but that's kind of my my toy, and her said, well, you realize I'm gonna have to compete with you. I think I got the like smilier version of the story. because I was the younger kid, so I got the smiley version. And my grandfather said, "Look, you at least tried to buy it before you stole it. What can I say?"
Well,
Yeah.
remember, there was a third competitor, or there was a third one in that. And nobody remembers Brick Bradford.
No idea who that is.
There was a Brick Bradford comic strip that was also a space-oriented comic strip. It was based on When Worlds Collide.
Yeah.
And it lasted for a couple of decades. They made a serial about it, and it just never connected.
Who syndicated it?
Excuse me?
Who syndicated that?
Oh, great question. Let me take a look, and I'll give you an answer.
Now you know why Buzz is just always an invaluable resource. He knows all this stuff. Nobody else I know would know about Brick Bradford.
I actually once you said it, I remember.
Sorry about that, folks.
Is that a real grandfather clock?
No, it is actually a chest top clock that was given to Alexis, my daughter, and her husband as a wedding gift, and they've never collected it. 7 years.
So it's still sitting in your house.
So it sits on my house, and I listen to it.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It's the answer to the musical question of who syndicated it. It was Central Press Association, which was a subsidiary of King Features Syndicate, and they specialized in small town distribution.
You
So
know what's
King-
really interesting is King was also who syndicated Flash Gordon.
Exactly. Flash
They-
was for
they-
the
they-
big
And
market.
so it was, they
To
were
this
both
day.
owned by Hearst.
Yep.
Yep.
He for the people who couldn't afford Flash, he had Brick Bradford for them.
Well, King Features really started the whole package concept. And so I'm sure that for the weeklies and the small towns in mid-America, that was in their package, and
Yeah.
Flash Gordon was in the big boys package.
Yeah.
So, or what's that pitch sound like? It's listen, if you're a bigger market, we'd be giving you Flash Gordon, but
No, it's just dollars and cents.
It's
You
just
pay- You pay us $2.50 a week, or you pay us $12 a week.
You're right.
29.
It was like the same thing with the movie theaters. If you could afford a theater that would have MGM, 20th Century Fox, Paramount movies, you ran those. If you were a small town, you were running Republic and Columbia features.
wow.
wow. So they didn't have nobody thought of, hey, let's just have a different price for the different markets. So it was just that. Listen,
Yeah.
you guys aren't quite the size we're used to dealing with. So,
But I mean, there's a logic to that. I mean, it keeps the premium price up. It's like look at James Bond. The Bond people, Eon Productions, they're pretty savvy about not licensing it to really cheap media or to really cheap what do you call them? Not sponsors, but
licensors,
yeah. They
Licensees.
keep that price value up.
licensees.
If somebody wanted to do like James Bond Jr. or something like that, that's a separate deal way over here. It has nothing to do with the real James Bond, but you can spin that off.
Well, you have to remember how many newspapers there were at this time too.
Oh, yeah.
And I think a large part of it was Hearst wanted to protect his newspaper empire and maybe people he had, alliances with, but he didn't want to not have the revenues from the other people.
Yeah.
So you had Scripps Howard, were Scripps first and Scripps Howard, or Hart Hanks or any of those. If they were in the very small markets, he wanted revenue from them, but he didn't want to diminish the possibility that his major metro adjacent community was going to draw some Sunday, particularly Sunday buyers out of those communities that only had the small dailies or weekly.
No, but I got a question about, if you guys know from your grandfather, maybe what was the inspiration for Wilma Deering? It's like, because she's like this really savvy sharp person in the future that he first meets.
Well, she is a very modern heroine,
Yeah.
you know, and that was part of on the standard sheet, which we just saw recently. They're very specific that women had to be depicted as this was not about damsels in distress or anything like that. They had to be depicted as the equal of men, and women actually outranked Buck, which I'm sure was a radical concept at the time. And is that even carried through into Erin Gray?
Yeah.
I mean, she outranked.
Well, and I mean, that was the kind of woman he really related to, because our grandmother was unbelievably way ahead of her time, both in education but also independence.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think that reflected his own.
Yes,
world.
he wasn't going home if the damsels in distress.
Notice
He wouldn't take a vacation. He wouldn't take a vacation one year. She wanted a vacation. She threw her two kids into the car, and they went to New Orleans. So in about 1937, she hopped in a car and drove to New Orleans with two kids. That was not a usual event.
Wow.
Yeah, we didn't really. I mean, that's kind of interesting. I mean, this gets way more into family history than anybody wants to know. But we like everybody in our family. I mean, we never really had anybody that was a damsel in distress.
No.
They just didn't fall into that category. I mean, mom was like in companies during World War II and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting.
And that's what's weird about Flash Gordon is like, especially since it came later, and there's nothing against Alex Raymond. I'm crazy for it, but it's like the women are just like Dale Arden is just getting dragged around and just waiting for Flash to like rescue her all the time.
Well, she used to spend her time at the swimming pool at San Simeon.
Yeah. Every Flash Gordon story is the same thing. Dale gets captured, so that Flash and Zarkov have to rescue her, so that Zarkov could get captured, so that Dale and Flash have to rescue her, so that Flash gets captured, and it's the same damn story. I had a chance about 5 years ago. I was house sitting for somebody, and he had a complete collection of the Flash Gordon things, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to finally read Flash Gordon in its entirety. After volume 3, it was tiresome. I had to force myself through the thing. The great thing about Buck Rogers is it's always something new, something different. It's a different kind of a challenge, a different story. It approaches it from a different angle. And the other thing about Flash Gordon, you knew what movie the writer saw the week before. Because every single thing, they would rip off whatever movie he had seen. If he had seen 1 million BC, we're in the caveman land of Mongo.
Yeah.
If they had seen Prisoner of Zenda, we're in the Ruritarian section of it. And it was just whatever the movie was he saw that week.
Don,
and at least the Flash, at least the Buck stuff was original. They were trying to make that world work, that future world work.
Don, was Hearst an investor in movies?
Hearst was kind of like behind the scenes. He was like an influencer. When he hated Wells, he like brought him down. But what he mostly wanted to do was get Marion Davies' career. He supported her career as much as possible. But he was less spending money as much as like he had the Gossip Queens. He used his papers to promote the people that kissed his ass properly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Willa Parsons, I've been watching. What's that? What's the name of the movie? It's the story of Ince's shooting. Peter Bogdanovich directed it. What is the name of that?
The Cat's Meow.
Yeah, Cat's Meow. Yeah, watching the Cat's Meow, and that's very definitely the position it takes. Is that he was basically in the business to promote Marion Davis's.
Yeah.
Okay. That was an aside, but I wondered if the reason that Buzz was seeing such references to movies was because that was a commercial crossover, but apparently not.
I don't think Hearst had a direct connection with the guys doing Flash Gordon. I mean, Alex Raymond, I was surprised to find out Alex Raymond really didn't like Flash Gordon. He would have preferred to have kept doing Jungle Jim, because that was where, you know, he owned Jungle Jim.
Yeah, no, he got off of Flash Gordon to do what he really wanted to do, which was like Secret Agent Corrigan.
Yeah, and then later on, he created the Rip Kirby series, which was a great Private Eye series comic strip that you know, he was doing until he died. You know. Yeah.
No. Okay.
Whereas Dick Calkins didn't really ever do anything other than Buck Rogers, did he?
Yeah, he before Buck Rogers.
He was a caricaturist. He was a good single panel gag cartoonist, but swear to God, he did not know what a vanishing point was. I can whip out some of the panels from the early Buck Rogers, and there's like 3 different vanishing points, and it's like, Dick, pick one. Pick one.
What was the World War One that he did?
Sky Roads.
Sky Roads, right?
Yeah, it was. I have never actually read a Sky Roads. You know, I mean, it's interesting. It's the demands of a medium. I remember this kind of hypnotic effect. One summer, my job was to read through all the old Buck Rogerses in the basement of the Dad's office. They had this like storage room down there, and after you get done reading for about 2 hours, just daily panel after daily panel, it's kind of weirdly mesmerizing. Because they recap yesterday. You know, I mean, the story moves along in this, you know, glacial speed, and yet it kind of gets fun after you've done it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting thing. But and so, all right. So what else should we be talking about? Yeah, I mean, yeah, Wilmo is like, you know, way ahead of the day. Buck. Okay, how would you describe Buck's character?
Who, me?
Yeah, anybody.
No, Buck is like, well, he's like the military guy, and it's like that's what I always like about him. He's just like a GI. Which I guess, I mean, it was like the Earth was on the dawn of World War II when it was created, right?
Well, it was 1929, so it was like right smack dab in the middle of World War I, and right in between World War I and World War II. And
it's like he is pretty much like the future GI. He's like the every guy, but he's been elevated. You know, he's a young guy, but he's been elevated because he's a pilot. You know, he's been elevated like this high echelon kind of person, but he's still just a goofy kid.
But
how much do you think the political implications of Buck affected its popularity?
Political, I think a lot. I mean, it's like just like you identify with him.
Like I said, wish fulfillment, right?
Yeah. No, you totally identify with him. You're meant to. How can you identify? Here, we're going to pick on him again. How are you going to identify with Flash Gordon? He's basically Mr. Ubermensch. He's like this super athlete, you know. He's a super.
So you mean the Red Plague and the Mongols and all of that? You think was part of the persona that made it important, made it work?
Well, I'm sure that it's like, I mean, they're looking at Europe, you know, and what's going on. It's like it's happening, you know. It's like Japan was already in Korea, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it had invaded China yet, but it was like Manchuria, right? So it's like I mean, if I was alive back then, you know, I'd be worried. You know, it's like you could see it coming.
Well, you raise an interesting point. I'm going to jump back a decade earlier. There's a science fiction writer, a guy named David Brin, who made a very interesting observation, which is in 1913, the year before World War I breaks out, the typical American kitchen was similar to a 19th century kitchen.
Right.
The utensils in it, the way that the cooking was done, the way that the food was preserved, it was straight from the 19th century. By the end of the First World War, it's what we would now call a modern kitchen. There's electricity in it, there's refrigeration. Not everybody had it, but the fact was it existed. And in that 5-year period of time, the average person's life changed radically, just as our lives changed when these things became more common. Everybody's life changed as automobiles became more common, telephones became more common, all of this stuff. And it was that shock of the new. It was that, well, everything's changing. How do we make sense of this? Buck is a guy from that time, from that era, who's projected 500 years into the future. And he's basically saying, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
You'll find out how it works. You'll figure it out, and you'll survive.
Yeah,
So don't freak out about the future.
They're kind of a rant corporation of we're gonna figure it out. We're gonna science our way out of it. I mean, it's The Martian. Is very much a Buck Rogers kind of a throw. I didn't even really thought about that connection, but it kind of a movie. You know what I mean? Yeah, we'll just science our way out of this.
Yeah.
And it was a real sense of, that people could, we can do it. Let's just figure it out and we can do it. It was a very little sense of dependency. And it was, it's funny, because we're living in a world right now where we can affect very few of the things in our life. Like, I have no idea how to, fix an iPhone. My iPhone breaks, I can't take it apart and fix it.
No.
The car, we grew up in the world.
Flint, I'm so disillusioned. I thought you could.
Yeah, right. But I mean, just think about it. We grew up in a world where, I had, Lorraine will test, I had like negative mechanical skills, but even I had a sense of could keep my car going. I mean, try it now. Just, decide, hey, what I'm going to do is I go fix my car, and you can't do it. I mean, I realized I'd never seen the engine in my last car. I opened up the hood and I was greeted with a warranty statement, basically saying that if I went beyond this point, it voided my warranty.
Yeah. I got a
If
question.
I took off the plastic thing, might as well have been Transformer sitting. I mean, if Bumblebee had been looking at me, it would have been the same kind of sensation. Yeah, and exact opposite world. And yet, I think because I'm trying to figure out what the message, what the general ethos of it should be now, and I'm kind of zeroing in on it should be something that basically sounds a lot like this is a self-reliant person who's got to be able to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something the world would want to see right now, because we really can't. We have very little agency in our own lives.
Well, one of the things that when I read, and here I'll whip out another one for you. My parents gave me this one my 18th birthday.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, there you go.
One of my prized possessions. When I read the original Buck Rogers continuity, which is where they're fighting they're fighting the Han Empire. It's a Chinese invasion of North America. They don't succeed by defeating them militarily. They succeed by finally, in the end, convincing them, we've got to negotiate. We've got to come to terms here. And they convince the Chinese, it'll be better to let them have their freedom and be allies and trade partners. I mean, that's literally what is brought up in the story. It's not just, smash an enemy into the ground. It's find a way of making it work.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, because that was very definitely it. Now, the interesting thing about that early story is everybody, I talk about this in the book, is everybody reads like the first, 2 months of Buck Rogers and thinks, your typical Hollywood development kind of guys, oh, yes. And what it is we're fighting the Han and, and all that. The truth is that bombed miserably in the day. And they, basically they had a story recall, And because remember, there's no going into all the stuff you think of as being Buck Rogers is not actually present in like the early book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no going to alien planets. There's none of that stuff. It's all it's all earthbound and all that. And the strip did not take off until they got off the Earth.
Yeah.
And they went in, dusted it off, brought Buck off the Earth, and the rest is history. That's why we're talking about it now.
Yeah.
Most people that read it, which is one of my pet peeves, think, oh yeah, that's what Buck Rogers is, and that's really not at all what it is. It's one of those things where the artifact we have of early Buck Rogers is actually the failed artifact.
Mhm.
I wonder what would have happened if Dad had done the book, because I think the exact book you were holding up is what everybody thinks is Buck Rogers. Thing everybody gets to find out what Buck Rogers is. And it was a logical thing to do.
I've got some of the herpes press stuff.
Yeah. And
They look like neo-Nazis in this strip.
what is that? The first story, or what's happening in that one?
Expected only cavemen. Talon learns our language to ride the tiny moon.
Okay, so that's later on, because they're on alien planet. They're on. And now what's funny is, and this was something we did later on when we developed for TSR, is we wanted to keep it inside the solar system, and and the idea being you have a virtually infinite universe, but it's finite in the sense that you don't just have star fields flying by every time. It's an infinite universe.
It's like but Buck Rogers lives in a world that's like, it's again plausible future.
Yeah,
and like you don't have to. I mean, okay, what took me out of the movie, say, Empire Strikes Back. Luke Skywalker.
Wait! That's one of the greatest movies of all time.
It is. Carefully. But it's like he takes off in the TIE Fighter, which is a small craft, and goes to Yoda. And I was like, so those things can go like
time and distance is all weird in that series. Yeah,
I know. But I'm just saying, no, it is the best in the series, especially. It's great. It's fantastic. But that's one thing it took me out. Whereas Buck Rogers, you got the feeling that, the world that it's in the solar system, so getting to the rings of Saturn is possible. It's like whatever the propulsion system is, it's badass. Mm-hmm. But it's also not like unbelievable. You don't go through a black hole.
Yeah, no, it's not this infinite, space where you go through the black hole, which is what that's what what I really wanted to do. What interests me is the whole idea that theoretically we could build all that stuff. I mean, theoretically we could actually go to those places.
Yeah.
And we actually could terraform Mars, and we actually could find some way of existing on Venus and all that. I mean, it's something where like you can't do it.
It's related to our brain, like especially the people in like the 20s, like 1929, 1930. It's like you still think about the planet, you think about the ocean. So if you think about the solar system, it's kind of like that. It's like you have fleets out here, you have outposts, you have those kinds of things. Whereas if you're, say, in warp speed universe, where it's like you can just get to places in an eye blink, it's like it's totally different. Like the guys that like are mining Saturn's rings or on like Enceladus or something mining water, those guys are kind of cut off. It's like it's shipments going back and forth, and they take a long time to get back and forth. And it's like a world that's like plausible, because then like the military of like Rogers' world, they got to police this stuff, and there are pirates.
Yeah.
They have like layers and stuff on asteroids. It's like it's really
cool.
Cool.
I just treated the asteroid belt like it was Pirate Islands, the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was
so romantic. It's just so much more romantic. It's like outer space is a romantic environment. I guess Flash Gordon is too, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, but Flash Gordon was all confined to one planet.
Yeah, it's
Mongo, one thing you'll give Flash Gordon credit for, Mongo was the only science fiction planet that had a variety of ecologies. It had deserts, it had mountains,
Yeah.
it had ice packs, it had all this stuff because they didn't want to be traveling through space to different planets.
Yeah, they just happen to pass close to Earth.
Somebody still got that weird wind tunnel.
Yeah, where's the wind tunnel coming from? Okay, here, I'll mute and see whether it's me. Hold on 1 second here. Okay, I muted. It was still happening. Somebody else.
Yeah, I muted. It's still happening.
I muted and it's still happening.
Did I do anything?
It still happened when Kevin muted.
Oh.
Lauren, have you got a fan or anything going near there?
No. And I don't know where mute is. So I'm really up.
Remotely mute, Lorraine.
What?
Just see if you can remotely mute you and see whether
Well, it stopped now,
It's
and
gone
Kevin's muted.
whatever we did, it stopped. Okay, so we'll.
Oh, Kevin muted. Kevin, what's going on? You're mute.
Am I
There you
back?
are. You're back. What did you have? Running? What did you have?
Oh, is that wind? Hang on.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. You must have an AC unit or something, Kevin.
I think I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bingo.
Yep.
I never realized that about Flash Gordon. I mean, it's like, I made it my business not to know about Flash Gordon. I never realized it all took place on the same planet.
Yeah.
Planet with a whole bunch of different ecologies.
Mhm.
I mean, what we pretty much did, that's actually not true. Even in the board game,
Ta-da.
Buck Rogers world, and it had a lot of different environments on this stuff. But a lot of different environments because we had to divide the board into different areas and ecologies and arcologies just for gameplay, which is kind of funny. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have thought of it, but when you're confronted with doing it for a game, you realize you have to.
Damn.
But what happened? Okay, so what is there out there that is actually like everybody's afraid now to speculate on the future? I don't know they're afraid of being wrong or all that, but I mean, there's not, or whether there's a reason for it, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of stuff out there that actually says, "Hey, let's take a look at the future and make it really exciting." I mean, it's either pure science fantasy, it's people with superpowers. But it very little is it actually sort of speculative and paints a picture of the future. Why is that? I mean, they're doing it back in the 30s.
Well, I think right now it's because most of the next generation, the forms of entertainment are it's basically role playing,
Right.
and they run like all the the games like.
Well, I also think traditionally, from a literature standpoint, futurism tends to be dystopic. Occasionally, you can do like utopia, like Thomas More and shit. But a utopia, by almost a definition, is boring, right? Everything's great, everything's good, everything's
Right.
lovely. It's so I think literature-wise, you end up even like something like, hey, Logan's Run, that doesn't seem so bad. Everybody's like getting laid every night and everybody's like living till 30. Oh, wait, you die at 30? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I understand that it goes to dystopic, but there's very little speculation on like new ideas. I mean, like Minority Report, it was one of those movies where you can like or not like the movie, but what was interesting about it is it was at least trying to have ideas.
Yes.
And trying to picture.
But still, that's a dystopia.
That is correct.
No.
That
I mean,
is,
it's very rare. It's very rare when you posit. That was the nice thing about Buck Rogers. There's an element of it is like, yeah, I could do without that shit, but it's trying to mostly posit a future that, to use the term I've used 3 times in an hour, so I sound like a rerun. It's wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
Well, Flint, it's interesting you bring that up because the World Science Fiction Convention was just held in Ireland. They gave out the Hugos, and they gave out a Hugo for the best nonfiction science fiction presentation. And the Hugo went to the John W. Campbell acceptance speech of 2019. The woman who won in 2019, when she accepted the John W. Campbell Award, and Campbell, for those of you who may not know,
It
was
turns
the
out
editor
he was
of
like
Astounding and Analog.
yeah,
Very
but he was
influential
he was
person in
a
the
pioneering
field.
he was a pioneering guy, but somebody revealed that he was like misogynist, racist, or some shit, right?
He was very fascist, misogynist, and he was also he promulgated a lot of crackpot theories too. He had a thing he promoted for a long time called the Hieronymus machine, which was supposedly would give you psychic powers and was so powerful. All you had to do was draw the diagram. You didn't actually have to make the machine, and it would work. But anyway, this
I
writer.
know the world could use more practice. I mean, I'd rather have
This young woman who wrote this Chinese woman who wrote this acceptance speech.
What time is it?
It's 7 o'clock in Chicago.
I've never heard a clock that reports the time so much.
Yeah.
And we're almost out of time here. But
Anyway, bottom line was the science fiction until fairly recently, like in the last 20 years, had been focused in this very technocratic point of view.
Yeah.
And even if it wasn't espousing a fascist point of view, it was espousing a point of view that there was only one way to solve the problems, and it was a technical way, and everybody had to do it this way. And that was derived from Campbell's enormous influence in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's breaking open. Now people are doing different types of things, exploring different types of stories. There will be positive stories, but they're not going to be positive stories necessarily in the Buck Rogers sense, because Buck Rogers was a positive technological future. You follow me?
Yes.
It was saying that we will find solutions to all these problems. That we may find solutions to the problems, but they may not be technical when we address them.
Was your grandfather a fan of H.G. Wells? Must have been.
I don't know. What do you think, Lori? I honestly don't know.
I know he was an avid reader.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Because it seems like Buck Rogers and Shape of Things to Come is kind of like contemporary, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well, usually when stuff like this happens, it's something that's in the air.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so a lot of people are thinking similar things, and that's why it happens. But I don't specifically know that, because what I also don't know is I don't know what baggage H.G. Wells carried at that point. I mean, now everybody's got baggage, but in those days, people would have baggage for different reasons. It wasn't like they were just being canceled. But it was like, they would, somebody would just not like their theology or something. And Wells was kind of a controversial character that way. So I don't know, I have no sense that our grandfather really cared about that stuff at all, about theological stuff or, be out, canceling.
Wells was a flat out socialist. I mean, he was as left leaning as you could possibly get. And people don't pick that up now because they read the classic stories and they don't recognize in the context of the time when they were done, these were critiques of what the world was like, and they were espousing socialist points of view. We read War of the Worlds and it's just an invasion from space story to us. It's not, hey, Europeans, look what you're doing to people in Africa. We read The Time Machine, and it's not a parable about labor and capital. It's about, you got these mutants living underground and you got these people living on the surface.
Yeah. Anyway, but Buck Rogers, it's like the future that they go into, or the future that he arrives at, is kind of like it is kind of like a socialist society, isn't it? With women with equal rights. Women are officers in the army, which I mean, they were, but it was totally segregated. But Wilma is definitely just a superior officer, can order them around.
Women were not officers in 1929.
Oh, okay.
That
So-
came in World War II.
Yeah, so it's like, again, it predicted it, and it's like, so it is kind of a socialist utopian society of sorts.
Well, it's funny. It's like, okay, so what that was doing is it was saying, okay, we're going to go look at a future. And obviously, if you don't have problems, you don't have drama, and you don't have a story. We all know that.
Yeah.
So basically, it was, you have to be a world with problems, but it was a world you'd actually want to go to.
Yeah.
Any iteration of Buck Rogers, I want to go to the world. If I'm, the Gil Gerard Buck Rogers, that place was cool. And I guess a lot of it, is a lot of it, of futuristic stuff is, yes, they're trying to, send some, moral message. They're not just saying, hey, we're trying to entertain you and think of cool possibilities, which I think the thing, the reason everything tends to be, and I'm not believing, though I look forward to being proven wrong, but I'm not really believing that people aren't going to, we're not going to continue to have technological solutions and stories because, frankly, that's cool to look at in movies.
Well, you can look at like right now, it's like what is happening finally, like NASA and SpaceX, especially. Private industry is now like catching up, and like space travel is starting to look like feasible and plausible on a grand scale. They're getting close.
Well, yeah, and as we were saying before we went on, it's beginning to look a lot like Buck Rogers.
Yeah, now the ships. It's like finally I go like, I see the Dragon ship, and I go, yes, at last, you know how to make a rocket.
Yeah.
It's like
Finally looks like a rocket. You're right.
Spaceship, and they're gonna use it again. You can climb back in, clean it up. Who knows what those guys were doing to it, but clean it up.
Okay, so that gets the other interesting question. That is the value of this kind of fiction? Because it's a loaded question because my views on this are clear. That part of the value of this kind of fiction is that it gives people the ideas, and if you put the idea in somebody's head, the next generation is going to build it.
Yeah.
I mean, we know we're going to start seeing that things look a lot like Transformers because, we planted this in people's heads, and you're going to start seeing more and more things like that because
they're making them. It's like I've seen they're making. It's getting close to being a full-on robot. Like the Transformer. Like they made a big one in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean I know it's Gundam, but no, it's a Transformer. We know that.
Well, yeah. I mean, are you going to be driving, or will our kids be driving in a car that will turn into something else? And will that be because people thought? Because I mean, you remember? I mean, one of the biggest fans Buck Rogers had, when I was a kid, were all these NASA guys.
Yeah.
And they literally, they're really sorry. I just got a message from Mike. You can tell they're literally, we're trying to build the cool stuff that they read about in comic strips, and they were pretty unabashed about it. I mean, that's to build this stuff.
That's what Rick Bradbury said. I actually heard him like at screening of It Came from Outer Space, and some kid in the audience, they were doing a question and answer, and Bradbury, he's in a wheelchair, and this guy went and said, "Why science fiction?" And the audience went, "Boo!" And Ray Bradbury says, "No, you guys quiet. That's a good question. Why?" And the answer, he said, "Because Jules Verne dreamed of a submersible that went around the world, and we built it." He says, and then he dreamed about going to the moon, and we did it. And it's like, he says, "You know what? We're going to Mars because I wrote a story about going to Mars."
Right.
And it's like, people will just continue to do that. You
I
know,
would say that's the whole point, and that would be, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is the kind of inspiration I'd love to see come back, and that is the inspiration just because like you're really excited and want to do it, and nobody's getting lectured or anything, it's just it looks fun and aspirational, so let's go build it.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean and it seems to me that's the way it was, like 2001. Okay, when I saw that when I was a kid, you could never get the image of that out of my head, that's the way it's going to be and that's the way it's going to look, and we never made it there in 2001, and that was probably optimistic, but
but it's getting close.
yes, yeah, you're now seeing how that can happen, and what 2001 really predicted in a funny way is the ascendancy and the scariness of AI.
Yeah,
And running, barreling along building AI, and I don't think we see the implications of what we're building.
no,
I think we do, but at this point, we just don't care. We're kind of thinking, well, we can morph and change our culture and our personalities to fit with this new technology we're going to have, and like we don't really need privacy anymore. And yeah, and I have a feeling we're going to hit a breaking point on that, and that's the kind of thing you want to write science fiction about. But you want to have it be, okay, how do we solve this problem? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, we're moving. I hope that we're moving closer to the Star Trek future, than otherwise. Because it's like where there's like a point at least where the planet, like everyone starts getting along, and we kind of move out as like sane people who have like left our worst parts behind. The planet doesn't get killed in the meantime.
Right at this moment, it doesn't look like that's the way it's going. Okay, part of it is there may not be enough imagination out there. I'm kind of not really impressed by the amount of imagination I'm seeing out there now.
Yeah,
I feel like we're recycling a bunch of old ideas, and I understand that's because we got new technology, and so now it's about sort of the gee whiz of, boy, look at our digital, capabilities, and CG. But there's got to be a point where we start thinking about, well, what are we making? What's this movie even about?
Well, you're also looking only at it from a technological point of view. I mean, the big explosion is going to be in genetics and bioengineering.
and that's how you can actually get someone to go into suspended animation and actually survive if they wake up 3,000 or 4,000 years from now.
Right, but that's technology, and it's biotechnology and not whatever. But it's still a technological future.
Yeah.
I mean, all right. Have we lost our ability to imagine anything that's not a technological future?
I think it'd be tough. Like, I worked on Treasure Planet, and that movie would have done a lot better, I think. It came out all right, but it's very fanciful. But I remember having meetings where I was doing designs for aliens and stuff, and they started talking about tying knots and about rigging on ships. And I said, these are going to not be open deck ships, are they? And they said, oh, yeah, that's the fun of it. And I said, well, you lost your audience, because the kids just won't believe it, because they know what outer space is, And
right.
It's like, so if you go into it's like, it's got to be like a plausible future. They're just getting more savvy. And they're like, again, holding up the phone. All the kids are used to this. So you got to be wowed by the control panel.
But see, I'll still repeat what I said earlier about the future, which is, you had people like William Gibson predicting the internet, but this, where I could get music like it's water and video like it's water, and I can text Flint a dirty joke and call Lorraine on it, and look up the entire some knowledge of mankind. Like, nobody was predicting this. You can't tell me anybody predicted that, even in fiction. So I think the future is going to be really interesting because,
Well, I mean, okay.
predict.
I mean, if I were making the argument somebody was predicting it, was stuff like Dick Tracy's watch. Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here with my
Dick Tracy's watch was like to call it to
used Apple Watch, which I think ought to be trash, but nevertheless, this is Dick Tracy's two-way wristwatch. Two-way
No,
radio.
but if you look at history, you went from the classical history of Greece and Rome to the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. It could well be that something like COVID-19 is going to culturally and effectively stop a lot of the forward momentum of technology and cause people to put their interests in other places and just spend their time in other ways.
I totally agree with that. I mean, so what you're saying is, do you think that we're? I mean, what I totally believe. I mean, Zane said it like day 3 of this. He said it's amazing how little you actually need to be content. And I'm in this position where I'm having trouble remembering what I did with was chasing around all day every day doing before this that took up all my time.
I mean, take a look at how little gasoline you're using. Take a look at how little, how many clothes you haven't when buying, and how much your cleaner's bill has diminished. I mean, it's really dramatic how much narrower our lives are.
Right. And now, but are we happy about this, or are we unhappy about it, or are we going to hopefully take some of what we've learned through this with us into whatever the next,
Well, I think if you're trapped at home, not trapped, but if you're stuck at home, and it helps that we live in libraries. The group of people here that I believe it's like we've got books galore. We have stuff that it's like just going back. I reread the whole Patrick O'Brien series again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the 3rd time, just because like, well, what the hell, and I just went back to book 1 and went right through,
Yeah, Terry's a huge fan, and she was saying, I hope sooner or later it'll get to be long enough since I've read the books that I can read them again and won't remember them.
Yeah.
If you look at what's happened, at least in the Chicago area in real estate, the people who were committed to living in the city in apartments so they now have spent 2 or 3 or 4 months with 2 kids under the age of 10 in a 1,200 square foot apartment, and are now buying houses in the suburbs that you couldn't have sold for love or money because the property was too much.
Yeah.
And the more acreage there is, the faster the property is selling within a narrow range, because they may not be able to unload their apartments in the city.
Yeah.
And I think that's true in New York. I know it's true in Washington, D.C., because that's where my daughter is.
Yeah.
What, they just can't unload their properties?
Oh, no, Washington is a real estate market like probably yours, certainly not like Chicago area. But if they put their house on the market, what is done is they have a broker's open house on Saturday, a public open house on Sunday, and they accept offers until Wednesday, and the property is sold.
Wow.
So everything is selling people want to be in the city.
No, they don't want to be in the city in general, but in Washington and Georgetown, it's a different market.
Yeah.
But
Right.
in Chicago, everyone wants out of the city as fast as they can physically get out.
Yeah, no, it sure helps to have a backyard.
Yeah, you have to have a backyard if you've got 2 kids under 10.
And I don't have 2 kids or anything. I'm happy. I can stretch, I can spread out.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's like, actually, it's kind of sad in another, because it's like, I don't have anyone here that I can bug and poke and stuff, But,
So you've been quarantining all by yourself this whole time.
Yeah, but I have gone surfing, I've got work, but it doesn't pay anything. It's not nearly enough money. But there's like art work that I have to do, and there's jobs that I have to do and talk to people. It's just like no one's spending money right now,
Right.
But yeah, but it's like I use the whole house because like I have a drawing table here, and I have like another desk in the back, in my back room. That's another studio. It's like I use all of it,
Yeah.
But then yes, and then I go out, and it's like you don't want to get too close to people, but I do see people. I do go to the beach, and you can actually easily be careful down there. And I look like a bandit with because when I go surfing, I put on a headband, to keep my head, a bandana to keep my head covered, and I just have like my face is covered. I'm like a science fiction creature with like I look like I'm from Mad Max or something.
But yeah, but you're not very likely to get COVID in the middle of the water while you're surfing.
Not in the water, but there are groups of kids that just don't get it.
That's a big problem in
They're just
Florida.
running around, like a bunch of lunatics. And then it's like I'll go like to them and go, "Dude, space," and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry," and no problem. But you do have to tell them, like, it's just like it just doesn't sink into quite a few people.
We're going to be seeing a lot of changes in the way we relate to one another socially when this is I won't even say over, but when it finally settles down into a pattern that we will recognize as the new normal. But I think we're going to see a lot of changes. I think that I was reading an article about how the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, 1919 created Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because it enabled a few theater owners to establish these nationwide chains, and it gave them a place to show movies that were being made in Hollywood. And it just set up this
How did
huge industry.
I don't understand. Where's the link up there?
So you're saying that it's a good time to invest in movie theaters?
Not necessarily, but it's something will come out of this.
Yeah, no, I agree.
It is a good time to invest in anything outdoors. Like by and large, people feel safe outdoors, and you can distance in space, and it's really hard for germ vectors.
So you're saying that we should invest in drive-ins?
I think drive-ins are the future. It sounds silly, but yes, something like that. Because we're not going to not be social animals, and we like having other people around, and that's not going to change, and hasn't changed. And I think that's part of why. Yeah, half the world is going crazy. It's like, it's like any excuse to just go out and get out from under this because it's been too long.
I think movie theaters, even drive-in theaters, are not going to survive on a large scale. There will always be the revival houses. There'll always be some specialty houses, but that experience is being supplanted by home theater units. The drive-in experience. Just put a big screen TV in your garage and you save yourself money. Okay.
But it's not about saving money. It's
about going out.
That's it. The going out, yes, but the drive-in experience. That's something you put up with in order to go out. Somebody will find the going out thing that ditches the movie part of it, and people will give up the movie part.
Yeah.
Now, you want to hear my crazy idea?
Yeah.
One.
I was getting my car washed the other day, and I'm going through the car wash, and I'm sitting in there, and I just start humming to myself, "It's a small world after all." Amusement parks where you drive in and you go on the rides in your car, pulled through by conveyor belt.
You mean like the 1964 World's Fair?
Exactly. Only instead of getting in the car that's been set up there, it's like a car wash.
Yeah, your car
just hook up, you put it in neutral, and then you go through the ride.
Or if you go to like Utah, you can go to like the Wasatch, and they'll just hook you up, take you up to the top, and it's like a Hot Wheels track all the way down to the bottom of the mountain.
Where is this?
No, I was going to say, like, instead of skiing and snowboarding, they just take you up to the top and like It's like a Hot Wheels track all the way down to the bottom of the mountain,
Yeah.
and you're not in control.
All right. So,
I'm an
I mean,
hour later than or 2 hours than you are, and I have been putting off dinner, so I would like to sign off.
everybody's, well, what's funny is we ended up in a circular way, sort of a Buck Rogers conversation speculating on the future. And it's a shocking how hard it is to get people to do that. I mean, you know, when I put stuff up on Facebook, you know, I mean, you always can, you know, I mean, if you really want to be cheap and trashy, you put up, you know, some smack stuff, political smack, and you'll get 100 responses. You put up anything forward looking or futuristic, and it's crickets.
Yeah.
And I haven't figured out why nobody wants to think about that stuff, and it kind of bothers me.
Well, because they're scared. You know.
Well, it was true. It was true before COVID. It's like it's like they're afraid of being wrong or being laughed at or something.
I don't think it's the fear of being wrong or being laughed at. I think there's a legitimate worry about, we're going through even before COVID, we were going through a major transitional cultural change in this country. And it was going to be a rough ride regardless, no matter who was president, no matter what happened. And people are a little antsy about that right now. And I think that's one of the reasons why they prefer Star Wars type fantasies, which is in another galaxy a long, long time ago. They prefer dystopian futures where they can just smash whatever they dislike in it, like Mad Max.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting harder and harder to sell the Star Trek vision, the Buck Rogers vision. You know.
Well, right, but just about the time you think you can't do it anymore, that's when it breaks out. I mean, every breakthrough I've ever seen has been at exactly the moment that yes, that's all, you know, finished. Nobody wants whoops. You know, I mean, you know, that is kind of been the pattern I've noticed in life.
All right. Well, that was fun. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Talk to you guys later. Thank you very much for showing up here.
Take care. Thank you. Good to see all
Nice
of you.
to see you again, Lorraine, even if
Take
it's
care.
just
Special thanks to all you guys for showing up. And as we sign off, I'd like to remind everybody, be sure to get your copy of the Gamesmaster, Almost Famous in the Geek 80s. Currently available in hardcover at most major booksellers like Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And the Kindle version releases on Tuesday, August the 4th. You can get the audio version at audible.com right now. And autographed copies are also available from Rare Bird Publishing and the show links. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Once again,